For example, the one thing that we talked about for a while was self-harm, and I would have a lot of flashbacks of self-harm and get really triggered about that. And the one thing that I had to understand, and the one thing that I think took quite a bit for me to understand, just like a whole process of psychologically listening and being open and getting glimpses, was why I was choosing to self-harm. And a lot of that came down to understanding more about and realizing more that like self-harm in a lot of the ways that I was using it was my way of communicating when I felt so lost that words didn't feel like they were helping anymore. It was just my way of acting out, showing the world and communicating what was going on inside of me instead of initiating clear, open, honest dialogues with people in my life. Realizing that was like a process that took quite a bit. Like, I remember in the beginning, I didn't even know why I was doing it. I was just kind of in a haze while I was doing it.
Can I say a little something about that?
Mm-hmm.
My understanding of self-harming, we're talking specifically to your example, that was actually a coping mechanism for you. That's my understanding right now. You would, honestly, the word terrorized is a really good word to describe it. You would feel so terrorized inside. This was a coping mechanism that made sense to you. And it was something on the outside you can do, some action you could take where you in some way felt relief.
Yeah.
Sort of like it's a metaphor when a person is feeling so distressed inside and they reach for a drink, something on the outside to feel some kind of relief inside. That too is a coping mechanism that they're coming up with on their own to deal with this distress that they're feeling inside. Having a lot of understanding about how to use my mind consciously, I would listen with an open mind while you were talking about this. I did not go into judgment. I just keep using my mind to understand, to realize what is going on here. Because the point is understanding the source. The source for you. Not something in a textbook, not something I heard from somebody else, not something I believe, but the source inside of you, why you're doing this behavior. And so it was talking about it, peeling back the layers. And over time, my understanding kept growing. I kept having realizations, and then I would convey that to you. And a person really can feel when someone's talking to them from innate wisdom. There's a feeling about it that reverberated inside of you over time. You listened more and more to innate wisdom. You had your realizations about it. And there was a lot of healing that was happening.
Yeah.
To the point where these new levels of consciousness you cultivated and experienced inside, this is something in the distant past for you. This is another powerful thing about memory that we're talking about right now. When we do healing at the source, with the way our operating system is designed, the way nature designed it, and we use our operating system consciously, we do such incredible levels of healing inside that thing that terrorized us in the past, we have a whole different relationship with it, but a healthy relationship with it. Could you talk more about how that has, number one, how long ago was it you thought about self-harming, you actually self-harm, and your relationship now inside your head with self-harming?
Yeah, it's been over a year, I think, since I last like physically did anything. Well over a year. It's been also probably a year since I've like seriously thought about it as well. I can't remember anything in recent memory where I was genuinely thinking about it or having it like pop up in my head. Yeah, now I feel like when things do happen in my life, you were saying like in the past, self-harm was my way of coping with a lot going on. When I felt like I was on really shaky ground and there was like nothing I could do, like I felt hopeless in a lot of ways. But now when things happen, I'm struggling with a class or I get rejected from a job or something like that, now I just feel a lot more resilient inside. I feel a lot more open to experiencing whatever's going on and doing what makes sense. to take steps after that happens. I just feel a lot more like independent psychologically. Like, I don't need to depend on coping mechanisms or anything to feel better. And even now, it's not like I'm repressing the memory of self-harming anymore. I feel very comfortable talking about it openly. And I think that all just like shows just how much of a healthier relationship I have with self-harming. It's still a thing. Like I know it's happened for me. I've accepted it. I've understood a lot about what was going on there. But now I can talk about it and not feel like I'm going into an old place of dread and insecurity and fear and revisiting the emotions that I experienced while I was doing it.
Welcome. So glad you joined us. This is Got Your Back podcast, all things mental health from leading edge mental health facts. Well, we're nearing the end of our anxiety series. Our next series is a relationship series, so you want to keep listening. Today, we have a really special episode of Judgment Part 2. I'm your host, Faith Escudero, licensed mental health counselor, licensed school psychologist, licensed special ed teacher, and elementary ed teacher.
And I am your junior host, Ellie. I'm currently finishing up my 5th year at Northeastern University, and I've been an active client of mental health counseling for 2 years now.
We're going to do a psychological listening exercise to start with, to get our head in a really good space, to take in all the information that we're going to discuss today on the podcast, because we are currently an auditory podcast. To stay within the licensing realm, we're going to be using biological listening, our ability to listen to physical sounds through our biological auditory equipment. And we're going to be practicing psychological listening while we are hearing these physical sounds. That means we're going to be observing and noticing rather than thinking as we're hearing these physical sounds with our biological equipment. Let's begin. Just observe and notice the physical sound. Continue to observe and notice the physical sounds. Observe and notice the physical sounds. What does it feel like inside right now? Is the feeling inside any different now than before the exercise? Is different inside your head at all than before the exercise? Ellie, do you feel any different inside than before the exercise compared to now?
I definitely feel a lot clearer in my head. I feel a lot more aware of what's around me. Everything feels a lot more vivid because I'm not experiencing a lot of cloudiness or thoughts in my head. I've let those go, and now I just feel like I'm experiencing the world from a very calm, very open space.
Well, when I look at you, I can see how more alert you are in your eyes. When I look at you, I can see a distinct difference.
The thing that was kind of coming through for me a little bit after that exercise, when I was reflecting on where I was before it and where I am after, the thing that was really sticking out to me was how much more resilient I've become towards sensory experiences through this understanding and learning and practicing of psychological listening. In the past, I would have considered myself to be sensory sensitive. Especially loud noises have been a thing that I was always very scared of in the past. And I've developed this idea, I had it in the past, that I am just afraid of loud noises. I don't like loud noises, and so I would be really afraid of them. If I would go out somewhere, if a loud noise was happening or there was a loud band playing, I would let it sway my mood a lot. But I feel like learning about psychological listening and just this idea of just observing the noise, not having any thoughts or feelings or reactions toward the noise, experience it very openly, empowered me to just be able to enjoy my day-to-day life and live in a much more grounded feeling, since sounds are out of my control. The things that I experience are out of my control. I'm a lot more present or able to be present and resilient through changes in whatever's going on around me.
That is a great example of picking up the power called thought and drawing conclusions or making judgments about why am I having this experience right now? In the case of a reaction to a loud sound, to immediately pick up the power called thought, metaphorical, magical paintbrush inside, and to immediately draw a conclusion, make an assumption, create a belief. Oh, because I had that emotional reaction, I'm sensory sensitive. And then all of a sudden, it becomes this mindset or defining characteristic about oneself. Instead, one could just go into psychological listening and reflecting the way our mind is designed to reflect and realize, experience a leap of consciousness from innate wisdom, universal facts, why I had that emotional reaction, which is understanding the underlying reason, the objective facts, why I had that emotional reaction. Then it's understanding yourself from facts. It's having a clear sense of self from facts versus using this power called thought to make up subjective things about ourself, judgments about ourself that are in fact false. Because unless it's an objective level of understanding, is technically fiction. And so this is where we can go around believing these things about ourselves when they're simply not true. And so by being exposed to psychological listening, to practicing psychological listening, to understanding psychological listening at greater levels of consciousness, you're actually uncovering your ability to be resilient whenever these sensory things are going on, whether it's a loud sound, whether it's a flash of light, whether it's cold outside in cold winter weather, or my understanding is you even had a sensory reaction to metal objects.
Yeah.
Psychological listening, it's regaining our bearings inside naturally. And that process is called self-regulation. And it's actually a very simple process. We were all babies. for whatever reason, we would start having some kind of emotional reaction, typically crying. The natural inclination of a parent typically is to go over and to soothe the baby, to assist the baby to become calm again. And with a lower level of understanding, we can think the outside, the parent picking up the baby, the parent talking to the baby, is actually the stimulus for the baby calming down, because you'll see as moments pass, the baby will stop crying, the baby will start cooing. Those are all behaviors suggesting that the baby is going into a resilient state, a calm state. And with a lower level of psychological awareness, we can think the outside is making that happen inside the baby. But it's actually the baby deciding to psychologically listen to the parent talking to them, to the parent picking them up, to the parent rocking them. And so it's the baby consciously using their mind that they ground and become calm and quiet inside. With more understanding of the invisible, what's going on inside, about the operating system, how we're using it, we come to understand things that are invisible to our eyes, we're experiencing or is going on in lifetime, in a relationship with another human being, with ourself. Psychological listening is an essential skill to understand, and for a lot of reasons, it's a capability that is a beginning capability to a lot of our other sophisticated psychological abilities inside, such as experiencing realizations. And realizations is a super important to allow, to experience, to see a situation from objective facts, to experience inside universal facts. They actually come through from innate wisdom. And to be able to more easily, more consistently allow oneself to experience realizations, an important piece of that can be psychologically listening in live time. What we're going to talk about today, part 2 of things out of our control, where we can do a lot of innocent judgments about it when that's not in our best interest, when there's more conscious ways of using our operating system so we realize more of the facts of what's going on. When we make decisions from that level of understanding, we're heading in a healthy, conscious direction with navigating that situation, with understanding that situation, with cultivating healthy relationships in our life, or more important outcomes at work or in school while we're studying. Our last episode was talking about the biological, using our mind more consciously instead of seeing it from judgment. Today, we're going to go to the psychological, the invisible inside, and seeing it more from universal facts, knowledge, realizations, rather than judgments, assumptions, beliefs, an intellectual understanding. Place to begin is, have you ever felt when doing math or being in math classes, you were dumb, or you were just never going to get it, or you didn't have that capability to understand it? Or with reading or writing, was it really tough for you to learn to read? You just found yourself staying away from books because difficult to learn how to read? We're going to be talking about why we experienced those things in elementary school, middle school, high school, or even in college. What we're going to be talking about is new science in respect to learning styles. When we are talking about our brain is biology that was constructed by nature. What it does is it creates certain capabilities as far as learning goes. While we're using our whole brain to learn, we can actually have learning styles where the phrases where we're more left brain dominated or we're more right brain dominated. Without understanding this knowledge, that's where we can think this student is impossible to teach reading, or this student needs to be working harder, or I hate school and I hate math, or I'm really stupid when it comes to learning math. When we are born with a brain that is more right brain dominated with our learning style, that's when we have visual spatial skills. And that's when we can read maps and they make sense to us, or we read visual diagrams and it makes sense, or math just comes to us just naturally, or understanding science, chemistry, the element tables. It just comes to us naturally, but yet we can struggle with aspects of reading, writing, or grammar, or organizing our writing, or with phonetics or spelling. When we have a more left brain dominated learning style, that's when you see a child at a young age becomes these voracious readers. All of a sudden, they're picking up books that are more dense or have higher vocabulary because language just becomes so natural to them. Yet they could really struggle in the area of math. Not necessarily, but it's something that could happen. So we're going to be talking about learning styles, what comes naturally to us because of the way our brain is built, our biology is built. It's just these natural capabilities that we have inside. Ellie, I pointed out to you sometimes when speaking with you or working with you, because I have a school psychology background, it would become clear that you had a particular learning style. And then you would, with an open mind, use your mind more consciously, start reflecting on it and having realizations about it. Can you talk about being exposed to having a learning style, using your mind more consciously to understand your learning style?
I'll just start by saying, for all of my life, I definitely had a mindset around STEM, engineering. My family was very focused on making sure that everyone was an engineer, and an engineer is the best thing you can be. And so I grew up with a mindset about engineering being the thing that I would pursue, and that would be the thing that I would take into my career. And so I would take a lot of math classes, and in college I majored in engineering. And I always struggled a lot with it from a less conscious place, just like, whatever, I'm stupid, I just don't understand this. This is just how my life is going to be.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
And then I would love for you to continue.
Sure.
First, your family and you made this decision, a subjective level of understanding with the power called thought, innocently, and you decided, not from realizations, but from some subjective level of awareness, some conventional wisdom, that engineering is the thing. So when we start with that kind of mindset, listening to innate wisdom, when it's trying to steer us in a particular way or help us to understand, it's almost like we're deaf to it, like we have blinders on. You kept thinking that innocently. You used your operating system to create judgments, beliefs about yourself, interfacing this academic content that engineers learn. And you innocently used your power called thought, your magical paintbrush inside, to call yourself dumb in response to your studying, you're doing your best to learn, and because of what you were experiencing inside, something out of your control as far as what your brain is built to do, and interfacing with this material, you innocently started using your paintbrush to judge yourself. That's when we use our paintbrush to call something good or bad subjectively. How you were responding to this material as bad, as dumb, as stupid. And you were believing these things about yourself from an objective level of understanding. I knew it wasn't true about you because the way thought works and the insecure feeling behind these thoughts and where they were coming from inside. So I just wanted to articulate and using the operating and system inside, how we create judgments about something, and then we go into believing this thing about ourselves,
Yeah.
and then we're believing these things that are simply not true about ourselves. But please continue with your experience.
Yeah, and then I started counseling, and I was introduced to learning styles, which was something I never knew about before. I kind of just believed like some people are just dumb or stupid, and including myself in those moments where it was a very like judgmental idea of if you're good at math and science, like you're smart, and if you're not, then you're dumb. And that was like, to be like very honest, like that was the mindset that I had in my life.
Which is a lower level of consciousness about yourself, about learning styles, about how you work psychologically.
Yeah, I learned a lot about learning styles, and I learned about this whole idea of understanding more so like your natural capabilities. And so I feel like a lot of my journey with my learning style came from looking back on my life and just being very honest about what was going on. I was a very avid reader. I was always very interested in reading. I would spend like all of my free time reading or writing or doing something in the literary arts. And I remember in high school or college, I had another mindset of, oh, English classes are too easy. They're just too easy. Those things don't matter. And so I would throw them off to the side or totally disregard them as like simple or easy. But it's kind of ironic now. I remember in high school, I feel like my English classes, my writing classes would just come a lot more naturally. I would really excel in those. Not from like lack of effort, but just like it all just felt I felt a lot more motivated to do them. The way that I was using my mind in those moments, I would like blow them off or like disregard that, make up an idea that English classes are just easy and that's why they were coming so naturally. But I'd never focus on that or think about it. I kept trying to push myself into engineering, math, science mindset. I was like getting a lot of signs from my performances and from what I was doing. Engineering is not something that naturally calls to me. Even in college, all of my free time where I wasn't in classes, I was spending time writing for clubs on campus or running writing-based clubs on campus. But I never really reflected on that. And it wasn't until I started learning about learning styles, these experiences that I've had in the past, and saw what I felt more naturally driven towards, and started to realize more maybe engineering is not the thing for me.
My understanding is you would struggle with circuits.
Yeah.
What we're talking is about a specific example with engineering to understand more about learning styles and how this was outside of your learning style.
Yeah.
So can you explain, is a circuit, is it a visual thing you look at? Is it a diagram drawing? Can you explain what a circuit is and what you were expected to do, and then what your struggle would be?
This is a big thing for me because I started learning about learning styles while I was taking a circuits class. Circuits, like when you take a class, it's typically you're looking at a diagram, you're looking at all of these separate pieces, and your task is basically to figure out, to see patterns and how these things interact. Everything in a circuit is relative, so it's all high level, a lot of like pattern matching, a lot of picture-based visual thinking. And I'm looking back on it, the engineering classes that I feel like I really did do well at were the ones that were very reading based. A networks class is one that I took, and that class was, at least the way that it was taught, was very reading about these network structures and these types, and it was all very detail based. It was more so here's this thing, and then here's a list or like a process of how it works. Whereas the circuits class was every single problem you get, you have to use some higher level knowledge or pattern-based knowledge, apply it to this diagram you've never seen before, and then derive a solution from that. So I noticed my learning style, as we've talked about, is like very reading and writing based. It's very detail focused. I can read a big thing and identify like smaller components and kind of pull them out and analyze them in a much more meticulous way. But with circuits, like it's a very visual spatial activity. It's very dependent on pulling out information from your mind and being able to connect them all into this ambiguous visual space.
Our psychological self is our invisible self. And that's the foundation of our life. Our psychological self is perspectives, and a perspective is a thought plus a feeling. Our psychological self is making decisions. Our psychological self is learning and understanding and connecting. All of these psychological compounds, which are invisible, which are intangible, which are fleeting, originate from our intangible self that very much exists. And that is our operating system, our psychological operating system inside, which is all made of power. Mind, thought, and consciousness are psychological elements. They're our psychological operating system. They very much exist inside of us, but they're all made of power. And it's by using these three psychological elements that we're able to experience and create and respond with these psychological compounds, such as decisions, such as learning, such as a perspective, which is a level of understanding, such as a behavior, walking, talking, smiling, listening, thinking. All of those are behaviors. Those behaviors originate from a perspective inside that you have. A mental health therapist not only has a body of knowledge in social emotional well-being, which is clinical psychology. Your mental health therapist has a background in educational psychology, school psychology. It was separating and discerning these pieces, these psychological pieces inside, and then facilitating awareness. As you became more aware of your learning style, what happened for you inside?
Honestly, like I remember experiencing a lot of clicks inside. That was like the first thing, because I mentioned before I started really looking at my past and understanding why I've always felt really gravitated towards certain things versus others. And I would do a lot of thinking about that in the past. The level of mental health I have now and the guidance that I received from my therapist, I feel put me in a state where I was just much more open and curious. What is going on? What do all those things in the past mean? And I was very honest with myself. Is engineering really for me?
Now, that way of using your operating system is using your power called thought to create questions. And with questions, with sincere questions, that's an open mind, and you're allowing realizations to come through. And that's those clicks Ellie was talking about. And that is the opposite way of using your operating system than experiencing difficulty with the academic subject and then using your paintbrush to create these subjective levels of understanding, these judgments. Oh, this is why this is happening. I'm stupid. Ellie is describing to you opposing ways of using the operating system inside. And this is what she's also been able to learn in mental health counseling, grounded in 3 principles psychology. Use her power called thought more skillfully to ask questions, allow her mind to be quiet, allow realizations, allow clicks, leaps of consciousness to come through, to see the underlying facts, to experience the underlying facts about herself or the live event. You also had clicks about a very basic part of yourself, and that is how you were biologically built in respect to learning. There's other things to learn about learning. This is only one aspect of learning, a learning style. So for her to start understanding, oh, my brain was built more for language. Like that's more a natural capability that I have. Oh, now I understand. She was dismissing her ability to learn all she learned in those English classes in high school. With more consciously using it, she could have realized, oh, I'm really gifted at this, or she could have been excelled more within those English classes. It's liberating to understand more how you work inside, and then you understand more the direction to go in your life, not this arbitrary made up idea, engineering is the right thing for me. Instead, it's understanding there's some direction for you to go in where you really utilize your writing and your reading and your language and your speaking
Yeah.
capabilities in which you really excel.
Yeah.
Yes? No?
Yeah, I do feel like it was also liberating, just another mindset that I noticed I've had shift. I used to be very judgmental about classes I struggled with too. Like, I would say things, I hate circuits. And I feel like this is also a conventional wisdom thing of saying I hate math or I hate whatever subject. And I think it was interesting too, just like a lot more of a lighter feeling to just be able to look at things that I struggled with, understand where that was coming from, and not get super discouraged or not get super frustrated or have all this heavy hatred weighing you down.
You're starting to touch upon another important aspect of learning, and that is using your mind more consciously when it's a tough subject or when it's harder. Instead of going into all this busy minded thinking, all this judgmental thinking, all this anxious or emotional reaction thinking, less consciously using your power called thought. Instead, it's just going into this psychological listening, it's pausing, it's allowing your mind to be open, and it's using your power called thought more skillfully, saying, what's the best way to approach this? Or how can I learn this in a way that makes more sense? It is being wiser, more conscious, gentler on yourself, how to use your operating system and how to approach the task at hand. And in the end, you learn more. Number one, you learn to be more resilient, but you actually learn more about the content. You learn more about yourself and how to approach these harder tasks. Could you elaborate on this, please?
Yeah, for sure. I do have an example from when I was taking my circuits class where at one point it just made sense for me to seek out a tutor for the class. And this was right around when we were learning about learning styles. And I was realizing like how much my brain functions very list-based way, very process-based. And so I communicated that with my tutor. I was just straight up with him. I'm going to need more than a diagram and you drawing over it and brushing over stuff.
This is the power of self-awareness from realizations. You become a more conscious participator within the relationship. You already went in with this clarity, saying to the tutor, I need for you to give me a list, instead of the tutor on their own trying to figure everything out and you not understand yourself. From clarity, you're saying, from realizations, you're saying, I need this, which is so incredibly helpful in a partnership. You're doing your work. Now the tutor comes up with what they can come up with from their body of knowledge and put it in that form or talk to you about it in that way you need it. So I just wanted to point the difference when you have realizations, instead of coming from a lower level of consciousness and depending on the outside to figure it all out.
Yeah, definitely.
Please continue elaborating on your example.
Because a lot of the support for circuits is very visual still, which I was just straight up with him. Can we walk through the circuit step by step and piece by piece? I'm just going to ask you a bunch of questions about how do you know this is what this does? Or how do you know that these two things do this when they're together? Or so on and so forth. I just told him I need a much more methodical, step-by-step approach. And it did help a lot. Like, it did help me understand a lot more about what I was learning. And I feel like it also kind of like enabled me with tools to be able to approach the problems with a much more prepared mind. Just felt more, there's still difficulties I ran into, and there's still certain things that I could have upgraded from that process, but it was just a cool little example in my life of having this knowledge and this clarity and being able to actually apply it in real life to make progress in something that in the past I've had such a huge mindset about not being able to do.
So if I'm not mistaken, you used to be in a great state of anxiety when it would come to your homework and attending classes. And
yeah.
So part of that was your social emotional, your mental health, but part of that was also your self-awareness about how your learning style works and how to approach it.
Before I started learning about this, and I was super, super insecure about my intelligence and how much I was capable of understanding engineering. The biggest thing that I remember was I would be terrified of working with people in my classes, because I had a lot of classes in my earlier years that were group based, so you'd get a problem and work through it together. I remember I would be very silent through a lot of these meetings. I would be super scared of saying something wrong or saying something that sounded stupid, or people thinking I was stupid, because I already believed that I was stupid, since a lot of this stuff, as we've been talking about, didn't really click with me as easily. And so in those moments, like, I would give in to the fear. I would just say, stupid, I'm gonna let these people figure it out. I'm gonna totally hands off this because I didn't think I would be capable of doing it. So just like a lot of fear, living in a lot of anxiety for when these classes would show up in my schedule. After learning about this and learning more and accepting more about myself, part of that has been able to shake away that insecurity I was carrying into my life. And I was a lot more interested now, or in later years when I've had group work, I got rid of this shakiness inside, or at least cultivated a lot more security in where I was coming from, what I was capable of, through a lot of therapy. In group settings, I've been a lot more vocal. I've been a lot more open with asking questions, talking to TAs and talking to professors and project partners, having more of a voice. Even if I wasn't necessarily like solving the problem with what I was saying, I was still a lot more proactive with asking questions and understanding for myself what's going on.
Being engaged
Yeah.
in what you signed up for because of the knowledge that you cultivated inside about how you work and how your brain works, at least according to learning style. This is called transformation from within. This is called greater sense of self, greater levels of mental health cultivated inside. It's something that's happening inside, but it's really important. Being a licensed mental health counselor, when you're talking about being terrified of your classes, when you're seeing them on your schedule, then you're having to attend them, to be in that constant state of distress, that is really, number one, hard to live in. Like, that's where people can go to coping mechanisms a lot, like drinking or other coping mechanisms. That's where they don't maybe show up to class. That's where they start failing classes. But most importantly, that feeling inside, such a feeling of distress. It's really not a way to live, to constantly be anxious like that. But also, it's not only hard on one's ability to learn or one's ability to move through the world, navigate the world, develop relationships, navigate college, but it's also so hard on the body. This is where people get sick. They're more easily able to get sick. Their immune system is working as well. This is where they have high blood pressure. This is where they have digestional issues. And over time, when the body's under duress like that, when the biology's under duress like that constantly, that's where it leads to longer term illnesses, severer illnesses. The body starts breaking down over time because the biology is like a best friend to the psychology inside of us. They're separate, but they work together. So I can only imagine how your first couple years of college were just so difficult for you.
Yeah.
Something not necessarily you want to remember or revisit.
And I think this also is relevant to something else I know we wanted to talk about today. A lot of my earlier years in college just are completely foggy for me. They've almost been wiped out of my brain, which is interesting, I think. I was just curious if we could talk a bit more about
Absolutely. So now we're talking about another psychological capability inside, and it's called memory. There is so much misunderstanding about memory and how memory works. So our organic memory is how our brain is built. The brain, metaphorically, is like a computer. It's processing speed and it's storage. Our higher level abilities, psychological, come from the mind and how to use the mind consciously. When we're talking our biological self in relation to psychological capabilities, we're talking basically about memory, our ability to store experiences. And there's so many different aspects to understand just about that. And then we're also talking about how fast the processor is inside. Technically, in the world of psychology, that's when you're using the word intelligence. And intelligence, another word for it is smart. That is only one aspect of our ability to learn, our ability to take in information. For example, we can have an associative memory, or we can have a direct recall memory. This is all how our brain is built. It is a capability inside. When you're academically doing things, or even you're learning how to change a tire or change oil, when you're learning those things, when I'm talking about memory, or I'm talking about how fast your processing speed is, those are discrete aspects as far as your ability to learn that. You're capable of much more. You can be in a place and you can smell a smell. And then all of a sudden, it's metaphorically, it's like a little disc stored in your fancy computer called your brain emerges. In the now, you're experiencing this recorded idea called a memory in live time about something that happened in the past that has that related smell. That's called an associative memory. Or you're talking about something and you recall that exact thing that happened in the past. That's called recall memory. The way our brain is built, we have different types of memory and we remember in different ways. There's the way your brain is built when you are learning something. There's also the state of your mind and your level of mental health that affects your memory. When you hear of people that have gone through traumatic experiences, until that psychological trauma is healed, that relationship to that event that happened in your life, like you said, you'll experience a fogginess or you won't recall it.
Yeah.
It's not available to you.
Can we talk a little bit about what trauma means in this case?
Really good question. It's something you've been through, like domestic violence, being aggressively, physically treated by a partner, by a spouse. When you're going through it, what you're experiencing on the inside with less awareness of how to use your mind or what we would do inside at lower levels of consciousness, we would go through such a distressing state as far as the thoughts go through our head or as far as the feelings we live in. You hear about soldiers being in war, or you hear about people being in war zones. Basically, their life is threatened. They've either seen people get killed or physically harmed. Until we do the work using our operating system consciously, they are areas in our life that they become psychological burdens to us. It's like carrying weights inside. We become less emotionally or intellectually available in current time. But here's the good news. With this leading edge science, we are uncovering more about the operating system inside and how it's built and how to use it to heal from those circumstances. You can even speak to some of that, Ellie, how you were guided in therapy, how you were facilitated to use your mind more consciously so that you could use your operating system the way nature designed to experience this healing at the source of your trauma. To go back to what we were talking about, when that trauma is healed, at greater and greater levels, because it's in levels. It just doesn't happen all at once. You get glimpses, big ones, small ones. That's the mystery of the live moment and allowing innate wisdom come through. It's mysterious, your healing journey or what you're going to experience. It's all good. It's worth it. Having a realization, you feel alive again. You feel restored. You feel grounded. When we heal those things, we have all this emotional accessibility from the past and current time. That's where we have more access to memory. What we've been innocently doing with our operating system is we've been creating all these judgments and assumptions that has to do with age or dementia. When we're being asked to recall something, especially I've given a lot of psychological intelligence tests. There's a lot of components to memory from universal facts. So it's important to listen to the feeling inside and understand when you're using your operating system to create innocent judgments about yourself or someone else as far as their ability to remember or their level of functioning as far as memory goes. Another thing is the way you were using your mind and the level you were functioning at. That fogginess or low moods was how you were taking care of yourself, whether you were getting enough sleep, what you were putting into your body, and also all the anxiety you were experiencing. Fogginess you've been experiencing, which meant less accessibility to your memory or your natural cognitive capabilities, was coming from your level of mental health. From that was how anxious you were all the time. Anxiety, it's like a metaphorical shield, access to those true capabilities in live time. And that's one of the things you've been learning is not only healing some of those experiences, but also having realizations where you can go into those experiences more calm, more grounded, more healed. You don't experience as much fogginess in current time. So you have much more access to your true capability to remember and all these other psychological capabilities you have inside. There's a lot to understand, way more than just age. As far as memory goes, we need to be much more careful in throwing around that word dementia, to be more prudent and wise, to have an open more mind. Why is this happening? Why am I struggling to remember this? How do I go about remembering this? What do I need to understand and do so I have more access to memory?
When I was first starting out with counseling, the biggest thing that I was dealing with was just not remembering a lot until something would happen. I would see a movie or a TV show or just some thing that reminded me of like an event that's happened in the past.
Which is an example of associative memory or getting a glimpse. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I would just get triggered or it would bring back a lot of memories and all of the bad feelings I had associated with it, and I would just freak out or go numb or I would just have a reaction to that memory.
That can sound like an aspect of post-traumatic stress where you're in a situation, you're not thinking about it, and all of a sudden this glimpse, this memory comes back in live time out of nowhere. Then at your level of mental health, the way you used your mind in response to it, you would use your power called thought, your metaphorical paintbrush, and you would start creating fearful thoughts about it.
Yeah.
And that's what you would call being triggered.
Yeah, and so there were a lot of steps in therapy. The first thing was making note more consciously of when I would get triggered or like the feelings that I would experience and what memories they were revealing to me. And that was just like a process of like being more present, listening more to the feelings I was experiencing, not trying to like brush off or blow off a moment of like extreme stress. And
which is a great example where you were starting to apply psychological listening rather than going into reactive thinking. Great example.
Yeah. So a lot of it was just bringing those things up in therapy and just very slowly, piece by piece, trying to understand more about what was going on, getting those little glimpses. For example, the one thing that we talked about for a while was self-harm, and I would have a lot of flashbacks of self-harm and get really triggered about that. And the one thing that I had to understand, and the one thing that I think took quite a bit for me to understand, just like a whole process of psychologically listening and being open and getting glimpses, was why I was choosing to self-harm. And a lot of that came down to understanding more about and realizing more that like self-harm in a lot of the ways that I was using it was my way of communicating when I felt so lost that words didn't feel like they were helping anymore. It was just my way of acting out, showing the world and communicating what was going on inside of me instead of initiating clear, open, honest dialogues with people in my life. Realizing that was like a process that took quite a bit. Like, I remember in the beginning, I didn't even know why I was doing it. I was just kind of in a haze while I was doing it.
Can I say a little something about that?
Mm-hmm.
My understanding of self-harming, we're talking specifically to your example, that was actually a coping mechanism for you. That's my understanding right now. You would, honestly, the word terrorized is a really good word to describe it. You would feel so terrorized inside. This was a coping mechanism that made sense to you. And it was something on the outside you can do, some action you could take where you in some way felt relief.
Yeah.
Sort of like it's a metaphor. When a person is feeling so distressed inside and they reach for a drink, something on the outside to feel some kind of relief inside, that too is a coping mechanism that they're coming up with on their own to deal with this distress that they're feeling inside. Having a lot of understanding about how to use my mind consciously, I would listen with an open mind while you were talking about this. I did not go into judgment. I just keep using my mind to understand, to realize what is going on here. Because the point is understanding the source. The source for you. Not something in a textbook, not something I heard from somebody else, not something I believe, but the source inside of you, why you're doing this behavior. And so it was talking about it, peeling back the layers. And over time, my understanding kept growing. I kept having realizations, and then I would convey that to you. And a person really can feel when someone's talking to them from innate wisdom. There's a feeling about it that reverberated inside of you over time. You listened more and more to innate wisdom. You had your realizations about it. And there was a lot of healing that was happening.
Yeah.
To the point where these new levels of consciousness you cultivated and experienced inside, this is something in the distant past for you. This is another powerful thing about memory that we're talking about right now. When we do healing at the source, with the way our operating system is designed, the way nature designed it, and we use our operating system consciously, we do such incredible levels of healing inside that thing that terrorized us in the past, we have a whole different relationship with it, but a healthy relationship with it. Could you talk more about how that has, number one, how long ago was it you thought about self-harming, you actually self-harm, and your relationship now inside your head with self-harming?
Yeah, it's been over a year, I think, since I last like physically did anything. Well over a year. It's been also probably a year since I've like seriously thought about it as well. I can't remember anything in recent memory where I was genuinely thinking about it or having it like pop up in my head. Yeah, now I feel like when things do happen in my life, you're saying like in the past, self-harm was my way of coping with a lot going on. When I felt like I was on really shaky ground and there was like nothing I could do, like I felt hopeless in a lot of ways. But now when things happen, I'm struggling with a class or I get rejected from a job or something like that, now I just feel a lot more resilient inside. I feel a lot more open to experiencing whatever's going on and doing what makes sense. to take steps after that happens. I just feel a lot more like independent psychologically. I don't need to depend on coping mechanisms or anything to feel better. And even now, it's not like I'm repressing the memory of self-harming anymore. I feel very comfortable talking about it openly. And I think that all just like shows just how much of a healthier relationship I have with self-harming. It's still a thing. Like I know it's happened for me. I've accepted it. I've understood a lot about what was going on there. But now I can talk about it and not feel like I'm going into an old place of dread and insecurity and fear and revisiting the emotions that I experienced while I was doing it.
Did you ever, this is just a question,
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking it genuinely, I don't know the answer. Did you ever experience guilt or embarrassment or shame? Like, tell me genuinely. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
put an idea in your head. I'm sincerely asking a question. Did those feelings ever come about because you self-harm?
Yeah, I definitely felt some level of shame. I remember while I was doing it, I just had like, all of these mindsets of I was thinking a lot back then about like how could I do this to myself? These thoughts of being embarrassed. I was like, oh, people are going to think that I'm looking for attention with whatever scarring I had at the moment. And, you know, a lot of thoughts of I'm failing myself. I'm such a disappointment. And that stuff too has definitely gone away the more I've learned more and understood more and let go, made peace with those memories.
So if I could point that out technically,
Mm-hmm.
there's the decision of letting go. There's the decision of I'm going to forgive myself. But understand the reason why it's changed so much inside of Ellie is because of the new levels of consciousness she has experienced inside. That is the ultimate solution when you're depending on a coping mechanism on the outside to alleviate the anxiety, to alleviate the panic, to alleviate the insecurity, the anger, the resentment, the guilt, the shame. When a person is experiencing those things inside, that is a level of consciousness. That is a level of mental health. That is something that has been cultivated inside unconsciously, less consciously. But with this leading edge science, with the three principles, with these three powers inside, with understanding more how nature designed our operating system, a big scientific fact that's been uncovered is this whole idea of experiencing new levels of consciousness. It is a thing. It is an actual thing. And it is a way of using our operating system. And it's a very sophisticated way that nature designed our operating system. A mental health counselor, a medical professional who has a deep level of knowledge about the operating system inside, they have experienced this themselves. They understand at greater levels how this works inside, what steps need to be taken inside, what even a new level of consciousness feels like and looks like. And this is a big part of this science is it's about the health of the helper. It's about the level of consciousness of the mental health therapist or the medical professional, because the greater levels of consciousness they've cultivated inside, they understand from psychologically seeing it and experiencing it how to guide their clients, their patients, from this awareness, from this knowledge inside. Ellie's not making this up. She's not talking about something she believes or just a decision she's made to let go of these things. This is transformation or healing that's happened inside of her by using her mind consciously, allowing innate wisdom to come through and experience these realizations, these new levels of consciousness. So this is a new place that she sees from inside, and she sees all of these things that occurred in the past. It's faded away, it's melted away, and that she doesn't have any thoughts anymore about self-harming. That too was a journey. I remember checking in with you in the past, and there were times where you were having thoughts of self-harming. Your level of consciousness was you didn't even think to act on them. How do you feel about me talking about this right now?
Yeah, no, I feel like it's just like it's part of my story. It's just part of how much I've done. And I feel like a lot of my life, I was scared of talking about this stuff, or I honestly just wanted to like brush it off or write it off as not a big deal, or like, I'll figure it out.
Dismissing it.
Yeah. Or like, other people have it worse. I don't know. I feel like I can see without judgment that what I was doing in the past, that was a huge sign that something was not right in me. And it makes sense, or at least it was in my best interest, as I've learned, to understand more about where that was coming from. And I feel like I've definitely healed in ways I haven't even thought or possible back then, just because of how much, like you were saying, I just have gotten to be exposed to this knowledge and practice it and have guidance in it.
I'd like to point out at least another essential part to understand about our psychological capabilities or our psychological self inside. Human beings have free will. And human beings also have this power inside, this operating system inside. It is with free will and with this operating system that we make decisions every single moment. And some of the basic decisions we make is how we're going to use our operating system, or what we're going to believe, or how we're going to respond when we're creating things with our operating system and experiencing things inside. So another essential aspect of understanding our psychological self is decisions. The decisions are powerful, and it is a way of using our power. And this is also part of this leading edge science that it became very apparent to me to learn more and more about conscious decision making versus habitual decision making, or conventional wisdom to decision making, or decision making from the personal. And it has been in the moments that I've had the honor and privilege to guide Ellie to understand more about conscious decision making, and then what she decided with her operating system, whether to learn it, whether to realize what I was talking about, and then her applying it, her free will, her choice when she applied it. So many of these moments when she made more conscious decisions that has led her psychologically independently, physically independently, to the place where she is now, which you can't predict this. It's not even worth your energy to predict or guess. Like, this is all part of being present and being open and allowing yourself to see, how does this work and where does this go? It's also been my curiosity around conscious decision making or lack of conscious decision making. I would see that would be pivotal moments in my life, in working with my clients, in my family's life, in the people around me. I would see how that would make a difference. And it just became an area that I consciously chose to dig into as a scientist of the mind, as a scientist of our psychological self. It's Ellie choosing to understand this and apply this at greater levels of awareness that's also led to her being at where she's at right now. And this is all invisible. It is a thing happening in live time, and we can talk about it in greater length in future podcasts. But could you talk about making more conscious decisions and how that's led to you experiencing this healing and living at greater levels of consciousness?
Yeah, I remember it's kind of interesting. The thing that was going through my head while you were talking about how all this is invisible, how different I am to who I was 2 years ago. and how much, because like when I started therapy, I remember the big word that was in my head was hopelessness. Like I just felt so lost. This was my last ditch effort. I had very little faith in therapy at that point, honestly. Like, I did not think it would work. I don't know what else to do, so I'm going to do this again. And that was like a whole process in therapy too, because I remember like I was really resistant a lot of the times. Like I had a lot of very stubborn ideas in my head about not wanting to commit time to therapy or thinking my time was better spent elsewhere. But it was a very long process of slowly understanding what was going on and what you're trying to communicate to me, Faith. And I'm not, honestly, looking back on it, I'm sure there's a lot of things that by chance or just like by kind of happen to work out in therapy.
The grace of the universe, or
Yeah.
some people call it the grace of God.
Yeah, just like the chance that I happened to find you, how different therapy could be.
That is the power of innate wisdom inside. Innate wisdom led you to my services, and innate wisdom was the thing that kept you coming back, you listening to it. Because innate wisdom, that little angel inside, that intelligence that the living energy mind has, mind is a living energy. It's very sophisticated. It was mind, this living energy inside of you, and the intelligence in it, innate wisdom. But it was in those moments that you listened to innate wisdom that brought you and kept you keep coming back.
Honestly, like I feel like a lot of it too was you were definitely the first provider I had that would give it to me straight. Because I remember I had a therapist before you, and it was all telehealth, and I would play Tetris during our sessions. In my head, I was like, I need to do this to stay focused. And my therapist at the time was whatever about it, but I remember our first few sessions, you would just point out, you're not paying attention right now. You're not focused right now on the appointment at all. And you would be right, and it would be the first time I got consequence for what I was doing. And I feel like that whole process of just like having a therapist that was actively involved in me as a patient, that was brand new. And I think that's part of why I was, oh, like, this is serious. This is like, I can't just get away with this.
Well, and that's anyone coming from this place inside. I was coming from my authentic self. I was observing it. It was right in front of me. Not to say anything, that's brushing over something. You're not being present. That was myself psychologically listening, observing and noticing, and speaking from my authentic self. That's how you build an authentic relationship.
Yeah.
It's got to come from that place inside. And then I see along the way whether you're going to respond to it or not. And that lets me know, is this going to work? Or, because if we're not on solid ground, where's it going to go from there? I mean, how can we possibly heal the source of whatever's going on inside of you? I understood in the beginning, you had an attention problem. You would be in and out. Now, it was for me to uncover, using my mind consciously, why is that happening? I'm not judging you. I'm saying, as a scientist, as a doctor, there's something for me to understand.
Yeah.
There's facts for me to understand. And unless we understand this, you're only getting bits and pieces of what I'm saying. How is this going to work?
Yeah.
Right? That's where learning problems start. That's my background as a school psychologist. You need to have better focus. This is innate wisdom. This is common sense. My first job was to point out, to help you to become aware, your attention needs to be upgraded, to discover what's going on here. And so piece by piece, we would discover, we would unravel, we would work on healing the source. It was very clear to me in the beginning, I knew inside you were really in trouble. I could feel it, I could see it. And I don't often recommend medication. This is what makes sense. For you to get it even in a place in your head where you could start even taking this stuff in. That's when we started talking about this leading edge part of this approach called an intensive.
Mm-hmm.
You kept coming up with these less conscious decisions of not doing it. And then that's when I just put a boundary in place and said, either you're going to do this or you're not going to do this. And that's going to be whether we move forward or not. We need to get some traction here. It's either going to be meds or you do this intensive. It was making conscious decisions and knowing how to do that, setting boundaries with you. Typically, you would make these conscious decisions and be responsive to it, which, how do I know that's going to happen? It's this collaboration. And the collaboration is my level of knowledge, myself coming from my authentic self, myself using my mind consciously to really see the source. So it's a present step-by-step process. It's an honor to have been of assistance to you where you're at now, which who would have ever known? There's just too many pieces of it.
The thing that was kind of sticking out to me was just back to this whole idea about judging who we are and believing what our minds are capable of. The thing that stuck out to me with the attention example was I had a mindset and I believed that my brain was just built to not be able to focus on things. And that was where I was coming from with you, because that's something that my previous therapist just accepted as part of me, and it was like, okay, she's not going to be able to focus super well. But through working with you and getting honest, open feedback from you from a more conscious place, a more curious place, I realized a lot more about where that attention span was coming from. And in those days, I wasn't getting a lot of sleep, and our appointments would be early in the mornings, so it would be 9, which honestly isn't even that early. I would just be falling asleep and super busy in my head, trying to
keep
stay
yourself awake. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a lot for me to learn there about not believing that I'm built to be depressed or anxious or have bad attention spans, but more so just being open and understanding more. Is there anything else to understand about these behaviors that I'm exhibiting?
And that's also where my level of understanding about psychological listening was super useful for you, because we often did a psychological listening exercise so you could experience it. You could be, your attention would be so much different after you did one. You could take what we were talking about in much more, but you also got to see firsthand your capability of being focused and your attention span.
Yeah.
So it was those exercises and the unraveling, it was breaking serious ground with you and making serious headway with you. Thank you. This has been an extraordinary podcast episode. Incredibly grateful that all we covered and that you were willing to talk about it, Ellie. And I have a feeling I trust I'm right about that there's a lot of listeners that are grateful that you decided to open up. My gut is it's helping people we haven't met or don't even know are listening to this podcast. And that's what this podcast is for, is to help you to understand, you the listener, you're capable of much more than you've understood in the past. And Ellie's giving you living examples. We will start our relationship series next.
Yep.
This is the end of our anxiety series, and it's really been quite a ride. Thank you so much for all your contributions and being willing to talk about it and being here, Ellie.
Yeah. Thank you, Faith, for giving me the opportunity to speak about this. I think this episode definitely felt like we covered a lot of very important and relevant stuff, and I hope it's resonating with people out there, what we're talking about.
So come back and join us. Keep listening. I'm Faith Escudero, host of Got Your Back podcast.
And I'm Ellie. I'm your junior host.
And we're saying goodbye for now.